Hello there, and welcome to the Sleepless Scientist, a quiet place in the cosmos where your thoughts can unwind and knowledge becomes a soft lullaby for the night. Tonight's journey will take us into the dreaming mind, into those strange inner landscapes that appear each night when the world grows quiet and your body finally lets go. But before you settle in completely, before your breathing slows and your thoughts begin to drift, I'd like to gently invite you to like this video and subscribe. Only if you truly enjoy these calm wanderings through science and mystery. And if you feel like it, you're always welcome to leave a comment telling me where in the world you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. There's something deeply comforting about imagining all of us scattered across the planet. Some just beginning the night, others already deep within it, all quietly sharing this moment of curiosity. Now, feel free to dim the lights. Maybe adjust your pillow or let a fan hum softly in the background. And as we begin, remember there's no pressure to stay awake. If your mind wanders, that's perfectly fine. We'll still be here, moving slowly, gently unfolding the story of how dreams came to be understood, not as messages from the heavens, but as something even more intimate. For most of human history, dreams were not considered a function of the brain. They were not processes, mechanisms, or patterns of neural activity. Dreams were something that happened to you. They arrived unannounced, filled with symbols, emotions, and impossible scenes, and then vanished by morning, leaving only questions behind. And for a very long time, those questions were answered not by science, but by stories. In the earliest civilizations, dreams were treated with reverence. In ancient Mesopotamia, dreams were thought to be letters from the gods, delivered at night when the waking mind was quiet enough to listen. Kings kept dream interpreters close at hand. A dream of a flood, a lion, or a broken tool was not just a private experience, but a potential warning about the fate of an entire city. In ancient Egypt, dreams were catalogued and classified, sorted into good and bad omens. There were even dream manuals listing symbols and their meanings, as if the sleeping mind were speaking in a coded language that only the trained could decode. These early cultures weren't foolish or naive, they were responding to something genuinely strange. Dreams feel real when we're inside them. They carry emotional weight, they borrow familiar faces and places, then rearrange them into impossible combinations. Without microscopes, brain scans, or electricity, it made perfect sense to assume that dreams came from somewhere else. Even in ancient Greece, where philosophy began to edge toward observation and reason, dreams remained mysterious. Some thinkers believed dreams were messages from outside the self, while others began to suggest something more subtle. Aristotle, writing over 2,000 years ago, proposed that dreams might arise from within, from sensations, memories, and bodily processes continuing after sleep began. It was a quiet idea, almost an afterthought at the time, but it planted a seed. Perhaps dreams did not arrive from the gods. Perhaps they emerged from us. Still, that seed would take centuries to grow. For most of history, dreams remained outside the reach of serious investigation. They were too personal, too fleeting, too slippery to study. You could not trap a dream in a jar. You could not measure it with a ruler. And once morning arrived, all that remained was a fragile memory, already fading as the waking world took hold again. When psychology emerged as a formal discipline in the 19th century, dreams returned to center stage, but still not as biology. Instead, they were interpreted as symbols, reflections of hidden desires, fears, and conflicts. Sigmund Freud famously described dreams as a royal road to the unconscious, a place where forbidden thoughts could slip past the guards of waking logic. Carl Jung, in turn, saw dreams as expressions of deeper, shared patterns of human experience, filled with archetypes that connected individual minds to something collective. These ideas were influential, imaginative, and deeply human. But they were also difficult to test. Two people could have the same dream symbol and interpret it in completely different ways. There was no clear way to decide who was right, and so, for a long time, dreams hovered in an uneasy space between meaning and mystery. They mattered deeply to individuals, yet resisted the tools of science. They were discussed, analysed, and debated, but not measured, not timed, not traced through the body. It's worth pausing here, just for a moment, to appreciate how strange that is. Human beings spent thousands of years mapping the stars, predicting eclipses, and measuring the movements of planets, yet the nightly theatre inside our own minds remained largely unexplored. Every night entire worlds appeared behind closed eyes, and then disappeared again by morning, leaving barely a footprint. The reason was simple. Science depends on patterns you can observe again and again. Dreams, by contrast, seemed private and unpredictable. They belonged to the night, not the laboratory. To study them seriously, something fundamental would need to change. We would need a way to look into sleep itself, to see what the brain was doing while the body lay still, to discover whether the mind truly shut down at night, or whether it continued its work in another form. That change did come, quietly, in the middle of the 20th century. And when it arrived, it overturned one of the most basic assumptions we held about sleep, that it was a time when the brain powered down, resting until morning. What scientists would soon discover was far more surprising and far more unsettling. The sleeping brain, it turned out, was anything but quiet. But before we follow that discovery, before we step into laboratories and watch needles trace gentle waves across paper, it helps to remember where we began. Dreams were once sacred messages, then symbolic puzzles, then psychological clues. For thousands of years, they were treated as something separate from the physical body, something that floated just beyond reach. And in a way, they still do. Because even now, with all our tools and theories, dreams retain a certain softness. They resist simple explanations. They blur the boundary between reason and imagination. And perhaps that is why they remain so compelling. They remind us that the mind does not always speak in straight lines, and that understanding sometimes begins not with answers, but with listening. As your own thoughts begin to slow, as the edges of the day soften, keep that idea close. Dreams were not always science. They were stories first. And like all good stories, they have layers, waiting to be uncovered, slowly, patiently, one night at a time. And with that quiet thought, we're ready to drift just a little deeper toward the moment when sleep itself finally allowed science to look inside. For a long time, sleep was imagined as a kind of dimmer switch. The lights of consciousness slowly lowered, the mind powered down, and the brain rested quietly until morning. It felt intuitive. After all, your muscles relaxed, your breathing slowed, and your body seemed still. From the outside, sleep looked like absence, like nothing much happening at all. And yet this comforting idea began to unravel in the middle of the 20th century, not with a dramatic announcement, but with a careful observation. In a small sleep laboratory, researchers were watching people sleep, not by listening to their dreams, but by listening to their bodies. They attached tiny sensors to measure breathing, muscle tone, and the gentle movements of the eyes beneath closed lids. The goal was modest at first. They simply wanted to understand what sleep looked like from the inside. What they discovered was something no one expected. As sleepers drifted deeper into the night, there were moments when the body seemed profoundly relaxed, almost frozen. Muscles went limp. Breathing became irregular. But behind those closed eyelids, the eyes began to move. Not slowly, not randomly, but quickly, darting back and forth as if following something unseen. These bursts of motion appeared again and again, in regular cycles throughout the night. This strange state came to be called REM sleep, short for rapid eye movement, and once scientists learned to recognize it, they noticed something else. When people were awakened during these eye-moving periods, they almost always reported vivid dreams. Not vague impressions or fragments, but full scenes, emotions and narratives. When awakened outside of these periods, dream reports were rarer and often much less detailed. For the first time, dreaming had a reliable biological signature. But the real surprise was still waiting. When researchers began recording brain activity during REM sleep, they expected to see slow, quiet signals, something like a dimmed version of wakefulness. Instead, they saw patterns that looked remarkably alive. The brain during REM sleep was buzzing with activity. In some regions, it was nearly as active as when the person was awake and alert. This was a shock. Sleep was not a uniform state of rest. It had texture, rhythm, phases. And dreaming, it turned out, was not something that happened when the brain was least active, but when it was deeply, energetically engaged. A useful way to picture this is to imagine a city at night. During the day, traffic flows, offices hum, and streets are crowded. At night, the city quiets, but it is not shut down. Power stations still glow, trains still run, emergency lights flicker in the distance. REM sleep is like that hidden nighttime city. The storefronts are closed, but behind the scenes, systems are still working, sometimes even more intensely than before. This discovery changed everything. Dreams were no longer just stories recalled after waking. They were events unfolding during a specific, measurable brain state. They could be predicted, studied, and timed. Science had finally found a way to meet dreams on their own ground, not by asking what they meant, but by asking when and how they happened. As this picture became clearer, another assumption quietly fell away. Sleep was not a single, continuous condition. It was a cycle, a repeating pattern of different states, each with its own character. REM sleep was one of these states, and it arrived again and again throughout the night, roughly every hour and a half, like a tide that keeps returning to shore. Each time REM sleep appeared, the dreaming mind returned with it. This helped explain something many people had noticed without understanding. Dreams often feel longer and more elaborate toward morning. That is because REM periods tend to grow longer as the night goes on. Early in the night, REM may last only a few minutes. By the early morning hours, it can stretch close to an hour. The mind, it seems, saves its longest stories for the quiet hours just before waking. But REM sleep is not the only time the brain dreams. Later research showed that dreaming can occur outside of REM as well, especially during lighter stages of sleep. These dreams tend to be simpler, more thought-like, less cinematic. REM dreams, by contrast, are vivid, emotional, and immersive. They feel like being inside a story rather than thinking about one. This distinction matters because it tells us something subtle but important. Dreaming is not an accident. It is not random noise. It is a mode of brain activity, one that the mind returns to again and again, night after night, across cultures, across lifetimes. And the brain does something else during REM sleep that is equally remarkable. While the mind is active, the body is kept still. Signals from the brainstem temporarily dampen muscle activity, creating a state sometimes described as dream paralysis. This is not a malfunction, it is a safety feature. It keeps the body from acting out the movements of the dream, from running, falling, or fighting in the physical world. In other words, the brain creates a private theatre. The mind can move freely inside imagined space, while the body remains safely anchored to the bed. This separation between mental motion and physical stillness would later become one of the most important clues about the nature of consciousness itself. But for now, it was enough to realize how carefully sleep was structured. This was not chaos, it was choreography. With the discovery of REM sleep, dreams crossed a threshold. They became something that could be studied without stripping away their mystery. Scientists did not need to explain what dreams meant in order to acknowledge that they mattered. The brain itself was signaling that something important was happening. And perhaps most quietly transformative of all, this discovery reminded us of something deeply human. Even when we rest, the mind does not simply turn off. It changes how it works. It explores, rehearses, revisits, and imagines. While the body sleeps, the brain tells stories. As you listen now, maybe your own thoughts are beginning to drift in that direction. The world outside grows softer. The mind loosens its grip on the day, and somewhere beneath that calm surface, the same rhythms are preparing to unfold again. The night is not empty, it is full of motion we rarely see. And with that realization gently settling in, we can allow ourselves to drift further into the quiet structure of sleep itself, where these rhythms repeat steady and patient, carrying the dreaming mind along with them. Once scientists realized that sleep was not a single, silent state, a new question quietly emerged. If the brain was not simply switching off at night, then what exactly was it doing instead? To answer that, researchers stopped thinking of sleep as a block of time and began to see it as a journey, a slow movement through different landscapes, each with its own texture, depth, and purpose. A typical night of sleep is not flat or uniform. It unfolds in cycles, repeating again and again like a gentle spiral rather than a straight line. Each cycle lasts roughly the length of a short movie, about an hour and a half, though it can stretch or shrink slightly depending on the person and the night. Within each cycle, the brain drifts through several stages, gradually descending and then rising again. The first steps into sleep are light and delicate. Thoughts begin to loosen. Sounds from the outside world still slip through, but they feel farther away, less demanding. This is the stage where you might feel as though you are floating, half aware, half lost. A sudden noise can pull you back easily. A passing image may flash behind your eyes and vanish just as quickly. As sleep deepens, the brain's rhythm slows. Electrical activity begins to move in larger, calmer waves, like long swells on an open ocean. This is deep sleep, sometimes called slow-wave sleep. The body sinks further into stillness. Breathing becomes steady and regular. This stage is often described as the most physically restorative part of the night. Tissues repair themselves. The immune system does quiet maintenance. If sleep were a house, this would be the time when the foundation is quietly reinforced. Dreams can still appear here, but they tend to be sparse and fragmented, more like thoughts drifting by than stories unfolding. The mind is present, but softly so, as if wrapped in layers of heavy fabric. Then, slowly the brain begins to climb again. Without waking the sleeper, activity starts to change. The calm waves give way to faster patterns. The eyes, hidden beneath closed lids, begin to stir. Muscles relax even further, and the brain enters that now familiar state known as REM sleep. This rise and fall, from light sleep to deep sleep and back up into REM, forms one complete cycle. Over the course of the night, this cycle repeats 4 to 6 times, but it does not repeat exactly the same way each time. Early in the night, deep sleep dominates. REM periods are short, almost shy. As the hours pass, deep sleep recedes and REM stretches longer, taking up more and more of each cycle. This shifting balance helps explain why dreams near morning often feel richer and more elaborate. The brain is spending more time in that vivid, story-generating mode. The dreaming mind is given more room to wander. A helpful image here is that of breathing. Sleep expands and contracts. It deepens and lightens. It moves inward and then gently back toward the surface. Dreams tend to bloom during the inward turns, when the outside world is held at a distance and the brain is free to generate its own realities. What is remarkable is how consistent this architecture is. Across cultures, across ages, across lifetimes, healthy human sleep follows this same basic rhythm. Even infants, though their cycles are shorter and more chaotic, show early signs of this alternating pattern. The structure of sleep seems to be something the brain knows how to do instinctively, without instruction or conscious control. This regularity suggests that sleep stages are not accidents. They're not side effects of rest. They are part of a carefully timed sequence shaped by evolution, refined over millions of nights. Each stage offers the brain a different set of conditions, a different workspace in which to carry out its nightly tasks. Deep sleep offers silence and stability. REM sleep offers movement and imagination. Light sleep provides gentle transitions between the two. Together, they form a kind of nightly dialogue between stillness and motion. It is also worth noticing what does not happen during these cycles. The brain does not linger in one stage indefinitely. It does not choose only deep sleep or only dreaming. It moves on again and again as if guided by an internal metronome. When this rhythm is disrupted by stress, illness, or artificial light, the effects can be felt quickly. Memory falters, mood shifts. The sense of restfulness fades. This tells us something important. Sleep is not just about quantity, it is about timing and balance. 8 hours of fragmented sleep do not feel the same as 8 hours of uninterrupted cycles. The brain seems to care not only that it sleeps, but how it moves through sleep. As you listen now, perhaps lying still, perhaps already feeling the weight of the day lifting, your own brain is preparing for this journey. The first cycle may already be beginning, even as awareness remains. Later, the deeper waves will arrive, followed by those hidden moments of inner motion where dreams quietly take shape. And through it all, your body will rest, anchored safely, while your mind travels through these repeating landscapes. This layered structure of sleep sets the stage for everything that follows. It creates the conditions under which memories can be reshaped, emotions softened, and imagination freed from the strict rules of waking life. Without these cycles, dreams would not have the space they need to unfold. So before we ask what dreams are for, or what they might mean, it helps to appreciate the stage on which they appear. Night after night, the brain builds this stage for itself, patient, rhythmic, almost ceremonial. And as that quiet ceremony continues, cycle by cycle, the dreaming mind finds its place within it, ready to begin its work once more. Once the structure of sleep became clearer, once scientists could see the brain moving through its nightly rhythm with such consistency, a deeper question naturally followed. If the mind returns to dreaming again and again, night after night, then dreaming must serve some purpose. Evolution is rarely generous with energy. The brain is one of the most demanding organs we possess. It would not remain so active during sleep without reason. One of the earliest scientific attempts to answer this question began with a simple observation. Many dreams are not calm. They are not peaceful strolls through familiar places. Instead, they are filled with urgency. You're being chased. You're falling. You're late. You're searching for something important and cannot find it. These themes appear across cultures and across time, even in people whose waking lives look very different from one another. From this pattern emerged the idea that dreams might function as simulations, not simulations of reality as it is, but simulations of reality as it could become dangerous. the mind. According to this view, uses dreams to rehearse threats in a safe environment where mistakes cost nothing and learning can occur without injury. Imagine a fire drill held in a quiet building. No flames, no smoke, no true danger, yet the body learns where to go and how to respond. Dreams may serve a similar role for the mind. They create intense, emotionally charged scenarios that train attention, reaction, and decision-making without exposing the sleeper to real harm. This helps explain why dreams often exaggerate danger. The pursuer is faster than any human could be. The fall lasts longer than physics would allow. The stakes feel absolute. These distortions are not flaws, they are features. By heightening the emotional impact, the brain ensures the rehearsal leaves a strong impression. Importantly, these simulations do not need to be realistic to be useful. A dream does not need to accurately recreate a threat to activate the emotional and cognitive systems associated with it. Fear is fear. Whether triggered by a real animal or an imagined one, the brain learns the feeling, not the details. Over time, this idea expanded beyond physical danger. Modern humans face fewer predators than our ancestors did, but we navigate complex social environments. Rejection, conflict, embarrassment, and loss now carry significant emotional weight. Dreams adapted accordingly. Many dreams revolve around social tension. Arguments replay themselves with altered endings. Conversations happen that never took place. Faces from different periods of life appear together, as if the mind were stitching social experiences into new combinations. In this sense, dreams may also function as social simulations, allowing the brain to explore relationships, roles, and emotional responses without real-world consequences. Think of it as a rehearsal space for identity. Who you are with different people, how you respond to approval or criticism, what it feels like to fail or to succeed or to be seen in a new way. The dream environment provides a private stage where these possibilities can be tested. There is another layer to this rehearsal, one that is quieter but just as important. Dreams seem to help regulate emotion. During REM sleep, the brain revisits emotionally charged memories, while stress-related chemical signals are reduced. The experience is still vivid, but it is buffered. The sharp edges are softened. This may be why painful experiences often return in dreams, not to torment the sleeper, but to be processed again under safer conditions. The mind takes something overwhelming from the day and brings it back at night, wrapped in imagery, movement, and metaphor. In doing so, it may gradually reduce the emotional intensity associated with the memory. Over time, what once felt unbearable becomes manageable. The event does not disappear, but it changes shape. The memory remains, but its emotional grip loosens. It is important to notice that these theories do not compete with one another. Dreams can rehearse danger, explore social situations, and regulate emotion all at once. They do not need to choose a single job description. Like waking thought, dreaming is flexible. It adapts to the needs of the individual and the pressures of the environment. This flexibility helps explain why dream content varies so widely from night to night. Some nights are filled with adventure, others with repetition, others still with quiet, almost mundane scenes. The dreaming mind draws from what matters most in that moment, whether that is fear, curiosity, connection, or unresolved tension. From this perspective, dreams are not random noise produced by a tired brain. They are purposeful activity shaped by millions of years of evolution. They represent a space where the mind can practice being alive without the risks that come with waking action. As you listen now, perhaps your own memories drift into awareness. Moments of stress, moments of anticipation, moments of connection. Each of these carries emotional weight, and each may one day find its way into a dream, transformed into symbols, scenarios, or stories that feel both familiar and strange. This does not mean every dream is meaningful in a direct or literal way. A chase dream does not predict danger. A falling dream does not forecast failure. Instead, these dreams reflect how the mind is tuning itself, adjusting its responses, preparing for what might come. The value lies not in the symbols themselves, but in the process. Dreaming allows the brain to explore emotional terrain freely without consequence. It is a rehearsal that never requires applause, a performance meant only for the mind that creates it. And when morning comes, much of this work is forgotten. The dream fades, the images dissolve, but the effects may remain, subtly shaping how we respond, how we feel, and how we move through the day. With this understanding, dreaming begins to look less like a mystery imposed upon sleep and more like an essential function woven into it. A quiet training ground, a private theatre, a place where the mind prepares itself for life by briefly stepping outside of it. As the night continues and the brain cycles onward, these simulations repeat, adjusting and refining themselves. And beneath the stillness of the sleeping body, the dreaming mind continues its careful, invisible work. If dreams were only about danger, if their sole purpose were to rehearse escapes and confront threats, they would feel very different from how they actually do. Many dreams are not filled with fear at all. Instead, they are quiet, awkward, emotional, or strangely familiar. You find yourself back in an old classroom. You meet someone you haven't seen in years. You try to speak, but the words come out wrong. Nothing catastrophic happens, and yet the dream lingers, heavy with feeling. These kinds of dreams point toward another function of the dreaming mind. Beyond survival, beyond physical safety, humans are deeply social beings. Much of our waking life is shaped not by predators or accidents, but by relationships, approval and rejection, belonging and isolation, love, regret, embarrassment, and longing. These experiences leave marks on the mind, and dreams appear to be one of the ways those marks are processed. During waking life, social situations demand constant attention and control. We monitor our expressions, choose our words carefully, and adjust our behavior in response to subtle cues. This ongoing self-regulation is mentally expensive. At night, when that control relaxes, the mind is free to revisit social experiences from a different angle. Dreams often replay conversations, but rarely as they happened. Words are rearranged, outcomes change, emotions are amplified or softened. A conflict from the day may return not as a direct reenactment, but as a symbolic scene, blending memory with imagination. This flexibility allows the brain to explore alternative responses and emotional outcomes without the pressure of real-world consequences. In this sense, dreams function as social simulations. They allow the mind to practice navigating relationships in a space where nothing is truly at stake. You can say the wrong thing, you can feel exposed, you can fail, and when you wake, the world remains unchanged. This rehearsal may help explain why dreams often feature people who matter emotionally, even if they were not part of the day just lived. A face from childhood may appear during a period of transition. A former friend may return during a time of loneliness. The dreaming mind draws on its entire archive of social experience, not just recent events, selecting what feels relevant to the present emotional landscape. Alongside this social rehearsal, dreams also play a quieter but equally important role in emotional regulation. During REM sleep, the brain revisits emotionally charged material, while stress-related chemical signals are dampened. The experience can still feel intense, but it unfolds in a gentler emotional environment. This combination is powerful. It allows the mind to touch difficult memories without being overwhelmed by them. Imagine holding a fragile object with thick gloves. You can feel its shape without risking injury. Dreams may provide a similar buffer for emotion, creating a space where feelings can be re-experienced and gradually reshaped. Over time, this process may reduce the emotional weight of certain memories. An argument that once triggered anxiety becomes less sharp. A loss that once felt unbearable becomes something that can be remembered without immediate pain. The memory does not vanish. It changes how it lives inside the mind. This does not mean that dreams always feel soothing. Some dreams remain unsettling, especially during periods of stress or trauma. But even these difficult dreams may reflect the mind's attempt to process experience rather than avoid it. The repetition itself may signal that the brain is still working, still searching for a way to integrate what happened. What is striking is how little control the dreaming mind exerts over these choices. You do not decide which memories appear. You do not schedule emotional processing. The mind selects, combines, and explores on its own, guided by priorities that remain largely hidden from waking awareness. This autonomy suggests that dreams serve the mind, not the ego. They are not designed to comfort or entertain. They are designed to adjust internal balance, to recalibrate emotional responses, to maintain a sense of coherence across time. Consider how often dreams blur timelines. You may be an adult speaking with a childhood friend in a place that no longer exists. These temporal collisions are not mistakes. They allow the mind to connect emotional themes across different stages of life, linking past experiences to present concerns. From this perspective, dreams act as emotional bridges. They connect who you were, who you are, and who you might become. They allow unresolved feelings to surface, not necessarily to be solved, but to be acknowledged and reshaped. This emotional work often goes unnoticed. By morning, the dream itself may be gone, leaving behind only a faint residue of mood, a sense of calm, a trace of sadness, a subtle shift in perspective. These changes are easy to dismiss, but over many nights they accumulate, gently influencing how the mind responds to the world. It is also worth noting that this process does not require conscious understanding. You do not need to analyze your dreams for them to have an effect. The work happens whether or not you remember it. The dreaming mind operates quietly, without asking for recognition. As you rest now, perhaps feeling the day loosening its grip, the same processes are preparing to unfold. Emotional threads from recent hours may be selected and woven into new patterns. Old memories may be invited back, not because they are important in themselves, but because they resonate with something current. Dreams, in this light, are not distractions from waking life. They are continuations of it, carried out in a different register. They speak in images rather than words, in feelings rather than arguments. They practice being human in a space free from consequence. And as the night deepens and sleep cycles onward, this quiet social and emotional work continues, unseen but essential, shaping the mind gently, one dream at a time. By this point, it may be tempting to search for a single, elegant answer to the question of why we dream. Survival rehearsal, social practice, emotional regulation. Each explanation feels persuasive, and each is supported by careful observation. But the deeper scientists looked, the more uncomfortable that search for a single purpose became. Dreams do not behave like tools designed for one job. A useful comparison comes from waking thought itself. When you sit quietly during the day and let your mind wander, what is that thinking for? Sometimes it solves problems, sometimes it rehearses conversations, sometimes it revisits memories, sometimes it imagines futures that may never happen. There is no single function. the same mental process can serve many purposes depending on context, mood, and need. Dreaming appears to work in much the same way. Rather than asking what dreams are for, a more accurate question may be how the dreaming mind behaves when freed from the constraints of waking control. During sleep, especially during the phases richest in dreaming, the brain enters a mode that is flexible, associative, and exploratory. It does not focus on efficiency, it explores possibility. In this state, memories are not replayed as recordings, they are pulled apart and recombined. A face from one time appears in a place from another, an emotion from yesterday attaches itself to an event from years ago. These combinations are not random, but they are loose. The mind is allowed to test connections that would feel strange or inappropriate during the day. This looseness is essential. In waking life, attention is narrow. Logic is enforced. Cause and effect must make sense. These constraints are useful for survival and decision-making, but they limit creativity and integration. At night, many of these constraints soften. The dreaming mind can connect distant ideas without needing to justify itself. From an evolutionary perspective, this makes sense. A mind that can only think in straight lines may be efficient, but it is brittle. A mind that can occasionally wander, combine, and reimagine is more adaptable. Dreaming may provide that flexibility, acting as a space where new patterns can emerge. This is why attempts to reduce dreaming to a single function often fall short. Some dreams appear to prepare for danger, others explore relationships, others still seem to wander aimlessly, stitching together fragments of experience with no obvious theme. But even these wandering dreams may serve a purpose by maintaining the brain's ability to explore freely. Another way to think about this is to imagine a workshop that runs at night. During the day, the workshop is tightly organized, tasks are prioritized, tools are used for specific jobs. At night, the doors stay open and the rules relax. Pieces are moved around. Old parts are tested in new combinations. Nothing has to be finished by morning. The goal is not productivity, but possibility. Dreams often feel strange because they reflect this freedom. The mind is not trying to communicate clearly. It is not trying to persuade. It is experimenting. This helps explain why dream interpretation can be misleading when taken too literally. A dream about losing your way does not necessarily mean you're lost. A dream about conflict does not necessarily predict an argument. These images are not messages with fixed meanings. They are expressions of a mind exploring its own internal landscape. The emotional tone of a dream may be more informative than its content. How did it feel? Urgent, calm, confusing, comforting. These feelings reflect what the mind is working through, even if the imagery itself is symbolic or distorted. Importantly, this work does not require conscious insight. The dreaming mind does not wait for the waking mind's approval. It does not need to be remembered or understood to have an effect. Much like physical healing during sleep, cognitive and emotional adjustments can occur quietly, without awareness. This perspective also helps reconcile why dream content varies so dramatically between individuals and across nights. The dreaming mind responds to what is most active beneath the surface. Stress, curiosity, unresolved emotion, learning, and change all influence which mental material is selected for exploration. During periods of learning, dreams often incorporate new skills in abstract ways. During emotional upheaval, dreams may circle the same themes repeatedly. During calm periods, dreams may become more fragmented or playful. The dreaming mind adapts its focus as circumstances shift. Seen this way, dreams are not a separate system bolted onto sleep. They are an extension of cognition, operating under different rules. The same brain that plans, worries, and imagines during the day continues to do so at night. but with fewer restrictions. This continuity between waking thought and dreaming thought is important. It suggests that dreaming is not a failure of control, but a deliberate change in control. The brain temporarily steps back from strict oversight and allows itself to explore. As you listen now, perhaps your own thoughts drift between ideas, memories, and sensations. This gentle wandering is not unlike the early stages of sleep, when attention loosens and associations become freer. Dreaming is that process carried further, deeper, and more fully. Rather than asking dreams to justify themselves, it may be enough to recognize them as a natural expression of a flexible mind. A mind that, even at rest, continues to explore its own experience. And as the night progresses, as cycles repeat and boundaries soften, this exploratory mode becomes one of the brain's most valuable tools. Not because it solves problems directly, but because it keeps the mind adaptable, connected, and open to change. Dreams do not do one thing. They do what the mind needs when the world finally grows quiet enough to let it wander. For a long time, memory was imagined as a kind of storage room. Experiences went in during the day, were placed neatly on shelves at night, and could be retrieved later, mostly unchanged. Sleep, in this picture, acted like a caretaker who locked the doors and kept everything safe until morning. This idea feels comforting. It suggests that what we live through is carefully preserved somewhere inside us, waiting patiently to be accessed again. But as scientists began to look more closely at what the brain actually does during sleep, this image slowly began to fall apart. Sleep does not treat memory like a museum. Instead, it treats memory like a manuscript still being edited. When we experience something during the day, the brain captures many details at once: sights, sounds, emotions, context, timing. At first, these memories are fragile. They are tied closely to the moment they occurred. If left exactly as they are, they would clutter the mind, competing for attention and emotional energy. Sleep offers a different approach. Rather than preserving every detail, the brain begins to ask quieter questions. What matters here? What should be kept? What can be allowed to fade? During the night, memories are revisited, not to be replayed faithfully, but to be reshaped. Details that are no longer useful soften and blur. Patterns begin to stand out. Connections form between experiences that did not seem related when they first occurred. The brain extracts meaning, not facts. A helpful way to imagine this is to think of a film editor working late at night. Hours of raw footage lie scattered across a desk. Not all of it will make it into the final cut. Some scenes are trimmed, others are rearranged. A few moments are emphasized because they carry emotional weight or narrative importance. By morning, the story is clearer, even though many details have been removed. Dreams often accompany this editing process. As memories are reorganized, fragments may surface in dreams. A place from one day appears alongside a person from another. An emotion from a recent event attaches itself to an older memory. These combinations are not mistakes. They reflect the brain testing how experiences fit together, searching for coherence across time. This is why dream imagery can feel both familiar and distorted. The mind is not trying to recreate the past accurately, it is trying to understand it. Over time, this nightly reorganization helps explain a common experience. We remember the general shape of important events, but forget precise details. We recall how something felt, but not every word that was spoken. This is not a failure of memory. It is evidence of memory doing what it evolved to do. In many cases, remembering too much would be harmful. Painful experiences would remain as sharp as the day they occurred. Minor mistakes would replay endlessly. Sleep allows the mind to keep the lesson while easing the sting. This process also helps prepare us for the future. By extracting patterns, the brain can apply past experience to new situations. You may not remember every conversation you've ever had, but you develop a sense of how conversations usually unfold. You learn what to expect, what to avoid, what tends to work. That knowledge comes not from storage, but from transformation. Dreams appear to participate directly in this work. When memory fragments surface in dreams, they are often stripped of their original context. A school hallway becomes a workplace. A childhood home becomes a place you have never visited. This fluidity allows the brain to test how old experiences might apply to new circumstances. In this way, dreams are not random stories. They are part of an active process of integration. The mind is weaving experiences into a broader internal model of the world and the self. Importantly, this reorganization does not happen all at once. It unfolds gradually, night after night. Some memories are revisited many times, each time slightly altered, until they settle into a form that feels stable. Others fade quietly, their work complete. This perspective changes how we think about forgetting. Forgetting is often seen as loss, but from the brain's point of view, forgetting is selective pruning. It clears space, it reduces noise, it allows what matters most to remain accessible without being buried beneath unnecessary detail. Dreams may be one of the tools the brain uses to decide what stays and what goes. This also helps explain why learning often feels different after sleep. A skill practiced the day before may feel smoother in the morning, even without additional effort. A problem that seemed tangled may suddenly feel simpler. Sleep has not merely reinforced the memory, it has reorganized it, integrating it with existing knowledge. In this sense, memory is not something we possess, it is something the brain continually rebuilds. As you listen now, perhaps noticing how thoughts drift and rearrange themselves, you're experiencing a gentler version of this same process. The mind is always editing, always adjusting. At night, when external demands fall away, that work becomes more visible through dreams. Rather than treating dreams as distractions from rest, it may be more accurate to see them as signs that the brain is deeply engaged in making sense of life. Quietly, patiently, without asking for attention. Sleep does not preserve memory like a vault. It reshapes memory like a story still being told. And dreams are the whispers of that story as it is being rewritten, line by line in the soft hour of the night. If sleep reshapes memory rather than simply storing it, a natural curiosity follows. If the brain is already revisiting and reorganizing experience at night, is it possible to gently guide that process? Not to control it, not to command it, but to nudge it, the way a quiet suggestion can steer a drifting conversation. This question led researchers to an idea that sounds almost poetic in its simplicity. What if the sleeping brain could be reminded of something it learned earlier, using the softest possible cues? Not words spoken loudly, not instructions, but faint signals that slip into the sleeping mind without waking it. This approach became known as targeted memory reactivation. The name sounds technical, but the idea itself is gentle. During the day, while someone is learning something new, a neutral sound or scent is paired with that learning. Later, during sleep, that same sound or scent is reintroduced, very softly, during the right phase of sleep. The goal is not to force recall, but to quietly bring that memory back into the brain's nightly workshop. The results were subtle but consistent. People who received these cues during sleep often showed improved recall the next day. Skills practiced before bed felt smoother. Problem solving improved. The learning did not feel sharper in a rigid way. It felt more integrated, as though the memory had found a better place to settle. To understand why this works, it helps to return to the image of the sleeping brain as an editor at work. During the night, many memories are laid out across the table. Not all of them will receive equal attention. Some will be trimmed. Others expanded. Targeted cues act like gentle bookmarks, drawing the editor's eye back to a particular page. Importantly, these cues must be quiet. Too loud, and the sleeper wakes. Too intrusive, and the process breaks down. The success of this approach depends on respecting the sleeping brain's rhythms. The cue must arrive like a whisper, not a knock. Smell turned out to be especially effective. The sense of smell has a unique relationship with memory and emotion. It bypasses many of the brain's filtering systems and connects directly to regions involved in memory and feeling. A faint scent introduced during sleep can reawaken associated memories without triggering alertness. Sound works as well when used carefully. A soft tone, barely noticeable, can be enough to gently highlight a memory already being processed. The key is timing. These cues are most effective during the phases of sleep when the brain is already engaged in memory reorganization. What is striking about this research is not how powerful the effect is, but how restrained it is. Targeted memory reactivation does not create new memories. It does not implant ideas. It works only with material already present, already meaningful to the sleeper. It amplifies what the brain has chosen to work on, rather than introducing something foreign. In this way, it respects the autonomy of the sleeping mind. Researchers also noticed something unexpected. The benefits of these gentle cues were not limited to rote memorization. They often extended to insight. People were more likely to find creative solutions to problems they had struggled with before sleep. It was as if the memory, once highlighted, could be connected more freely to other ideas during the night. This fits neatly with what we know about dreaming. When the mind is freed from strict logic, it can explore connections that feel impossible during the day. A whispered cue may simply help the brain choose which threads to weave into that exploration. There is an important boundary here, one that scientists are careful to emphasize. Targeted memory reactivation is not mind control. It does not override the sleeper's intentions. It cannot force learning where none has occurred. It works best when the person has actively engaged with the material beforehand, when curiosity and effort have already laid the groundwork. In many ways, this makes the technique feel less like manipulation and more like cooperation. The waking mind prepares the material. The sleeping mind does the integration. The cue simply helps the two align. This cooperation highlights something profound about sleep. The brain is not passive at night. It is not waiting to be instructed. It is already busy, already deciding what matters. When cues work, they work because they align with the brain's own priorities. There is also a limit to how much influence these cues can have. Too many cues can overwhelm the system. The brain cannot be guided in multiple directions at once. Like any editor, it needs space to work. Gentle guidance must remain gentle. For listeners before sleep, there is something comforting in this restraint. It suggests that the mind is not easily hijacked. Even in its most vulnerable state, it retains a degree of sovereignty. It chooses what to keep, what to reshape, and what to let go. As you listen now, perhaps with learning or experiences from the day still lingering, your own brain is preparing for its nightly work. Whether or not it receives any cues, it will return to those experiences, turning them over, looking for meaning. Targeted memory reactivation simply reveals what was already true. Sleep is an active process. The mind listens, but on its own terms. And in the quiet of the night, even the softest whisper can be enough to remind the brain of what it was already trying to understand. As sleep deepens and dreams grow more vivid, many people notice a familiar feeling. The dream makes sense while it is happening, yet when remembered later, it seems strangely illogical. Places shift without explanation. People change identities mid-conversation. Events unfold with emotional certainty but without clear cause. And still, while inside the dream, none of this feels odd. This peculiar quality of dreaming puzzled scientists for a long time. Why does the mind accept contradictions so easily at night? Why do dreams feel meaningful even when they defy the rules we rely on during the day? The answer began to emerge when researchers looked closely at which parts of the brain grow quieter during dreaming and which parts become more active. During waking life, there is a region near the front of the brain that acts like an internal editor. It checks for consistency. It asks whether something makes sense. It compares new information to what is already known. This region is deeply involved in planning, self-control, and logical reasoning. It is the part of the mind that says, "Wait a moment," before you act or speak. During dreaming, especially during the most vivid dream states, this editor relaxes its grip. It does not shut off completely, but it becomes less dominant. Its constant questioning fades into the background. In its place, regions involved in emotion and imagery grow louder. Feelings become richer. Visual scenes become more immersive. Memories surface without being cross-examined. A helpful image here is to imagine a creative studio. During the day, a strict editor sits at the table, trimming ideas, rejecting what feels impractical, demanding clarity. At night, that editor steps out for a while. The artists remain. Painters, musicians, storytellers, and performers fill the room. They're not concerned with accuracy, they're concerned with expression. This shift explains why dreams feel emotionally intense. When the brain's emotional centers become more active, feelings are amplified. Joy can feel euphoric, fear can feel overwhelming, sadness can feel profound. These emotions are not diluted by the usual layers of rational explanation. At the same time, because the logical editor is quieter, dreams do not pause to resolve inconsistencies. A childhood home can sit beside a workplace you have never visited. A person you know well can behave like a stranger. The dream accepts these changes effortlessly. Importantly, this does not mean the dreaming brain is disorganized. It is organized differently. Rather than focusing on external accuracy, the dreaming mind prioritizes internal coherence. The question is not whether events make sense in the real world, but whether they match the emotional truth the mind is exploring. If the feeling fits, the scene is allowed to continue. This helps explain why dreams often feel symbolic, even when no conscious symbolism is intended. The mind chooses images that resonate emotionally, not logically. A locked door may appear not because it represents something specific, but because it captures a feeling of being blocked or uncertain. A sudden fall may appear because it matches a sense of loss of control. These images are not codes to be cracked, they are emotional shorthand. Another interesting feature of this state is the altered sense of self. During dreams, the boundary between observer and participant can blur. You may shift perspectives without noticing. You may act in ways you would never choose while awake. This is partly because the brain regions involved in self-monitoring and reflection are less active. The mind experiences rather than evaluates. This change allows dreams to explore possibilities without restraint. The mind can try on different roles, reactions, and identities. It can feel what it is like to be braver, angrier, kinder, or more vulnerable than usual. These experiments do not require commitment. They leave no lasting trace in the waking world. From a cognitive perspective, this flexibility is valuable. It allows the mind to explore emotional responses that might be suppressed during the day. It offers a space where feelings can be fully expressed without immediate consequence. As you listen now, perhaps you recognize this contrast in your own experience. During the day, thoughts are often filtered, revised, and restrained. At night, those filters loosen. Feelings speak more freely. Images flow without explanation. This shift is not a flaw in the brain's design. It is a feature. By allowing logic to step aside temporarily, the mind creates room for integration. Emotional experiences can be revisited without being interrupted by analysis. Memories can be reshaped without being questioned at every turn. In this state, meaning does not arise from explanation. It arises from resonance. This also helps explain why trying to analyze a dream too aggressively can feel unsatisfying. The dream was not created in a logical mode. Interpreting it as though it were a puzzle to be solved can miss its purpose. The value often lies in how the dream felt, not in what it appeared to say. As the night continues, this balance between logic and emotion will shift again. The editor will return gradually, the artist will quiet, waking consciousness will reassert its rules. But for a time during dreaming, the mind is allowed to speak in its own language. And in that language, emotion leads, images follow, and logic listens from a distance. As you rest now, perhaps your own thoughts begin to soften. The need for explanations fades. Feelings come forward more easily. This is the same gentle transition the brain makes each night, preparing itself for the work of dreaming. In letting logic rest, the mind finds another way of understanding, one that does not argue or explain, but simply experiences, and in that quiet shift, dreams take the stage. One of the most common frustrations people share about dreams is how quickly they disappear. You wake with a clear sense that something vivid just happened. There was a place, a feeling, perhaps even a story, and then, within minutes, it slips away. By the time your feet touch the floor, the dream is dissolved, leaving behind only a faint emotional echo. It is easy to assume this forgetting means dreams are unimportant. If they mattered, surely we would remember them. But neuroscience tells a different story. Forgetting dreams is not a failure of the mind. It is part of how the dreaming brain works. To understand why, it helps to think again about the conditions under which dreams occur. During the deepest dreaming phases of sleep, the brain is active, but it is active in a very particular way. Regions involved in imagery and emotion are lively. Regions involved in critical thinking and emotional colouring are engaged. But the systems responsible for creating long-lasting, stable memories are quieter. In waking life, when something important happens, the brain tags the experience for storage. Attention sharpens. Context is recorded. Time and place are noted. This process creates a durable memory that can be retrieved later. During dreaming, that tagging system is far less active. The brain is not focused on recording events. It is focused on experiencing them. This means dreams are often lived through without being formally written down in the mind's long-term record. A useful analogy is a conversation spoken in a language you understand but never write. The meaning exists in the moment. You follow it. You respond emotionally. But without a record, it fades quickly once the conversation ends. Dreams are similar. They unfold in real time, but they are not always archived. This explains why dream recall depends so strongly on timing. If you wake suddenly during a dream, especially during a vivid one, the experience can sometimes be captured before it fades. If you wake later, after the brain has shifted into a more alert state, the dream may already be gone. Not erased, but simply never stored. Importantly, this does not mean the dream had no effect. Many processes in the brain leave traces without leaving memories. You do not remember every moment your immune system works, yet its effects shape your health. You do not remember every adjustment your muscles make while you sleep, yet you wake feeling different. Dreams may operate in much the same way. They influence the mind without requiring conscious recall. This perspective challenges a common assumption about consciousness. We often equate awareness with memory. If we remember something, we believe we were conscious of it. If we do not remember it, we assume it never truly happened. Dreams suggest this equation is incomplete. During dreaming, conscious experience can occur without lasting memory. You feel fear, joy, curiosity, confusion. You move through scenes and interactions. The experience is real in the moment, even if it leaves no durable trace. This idea is quietly profound. It suggests that consciousness does not depend on memory. It can exist briefly, fully, and then vanish. This has implications beyond dreaming. It raises questions about other states where memory is impaired, such as anesthesia or certain neurological conditions. The absence of recall does not necessarily imply the absence of experience. The mind may be more active, more aware than memory alone can reveal. Returning to dreams, this understanding also helps explain why trying too hard to remember them can feel counterproductive. The dreaming brain is not designed to preserve narratives. When we strain to capture details, we may disrupt the gentle transition between sleep and wakefulness that allows fragments to surface naturally. Some people find that simply noticing the feeling of a dream rather than its content is more sustainable. A lingering calm, a trace of tension, a sense of familiarity or surprise. These emotional residues may reflect the dream's work more accurately than a remembered storyline. It is also worth noting that dream recall varies widely between individuals and even between nights. Stress, sleep quality, and waking habits all play a role. There is no correct amount of dream recall. Remembering many dreams does not mean your mind is healthier. Forgetting them does not mean it is neglecting important work. From the brain's perspective, efficiency matters more than recollection. Forgetting dreams may also serve a protective function. If every dream were remembered with the clarity of waking life, the boundary between imagination and reality could blur uncomfortably. The mind benefits from allowing most dreams to fade, preserving the stability of waking identity. And yet, the influence of dreams persists. You may wake with a new perspective on a problem without knowing why. A feeling towards someone may shift subtly overnight. A creative idea may surface unexpectedly. These changes do not require a remembered dream to occur. As you listen now, perhaps with your own thoughts beginning to loosen, it may be reassuring to know that not remembering is not a loss. The mind does much of its most important work quietly, without asking to be noticed. Dreams do not demand an audience. They do not require interpretation. They are not performances meant to be reviewed. They are processes unfolding in the background, shaping memory, emotion, and understanding in ways that do not depend on recall. So if tonight's dreams slip away by morning, let them go. They've already done what they needed to do. In the end, forgetting dreams is not a sign that nothing happened. It is a sign that the mind trusted itself to work without supervision. And in that quiet trust, sleep continues its work, moment by moment, even when memory does not follow. There are moments in dreams that feel quietly extraordinary. You're standing in a familiar place that suddenly looks slightly wrong. The light behaves differently. The scene bends in a way it never would during the day, and then, without any dramatic announcement, a gentle realization appears. This is a dream. Lucid dreaming begins with that realization, not with excitement, not with control, but with awareness. The simple knowing that what you are experiencing is not the waking world, even as it continues to feel real. For centuries, such moments were treated as myths or curiosities. Stories of people who claimed to awaken inside their dreams were often dismissed as exaggerations or philosophical puzzles. Yet as dream research matured, These experiences began to attract careful attention, not because they were spectacular, but because they revealed something subtle about the nature of consciousness. Lucid dreaming shows that awareness can return during sleep. This return does not happen all at once. It is not a switch flipping from off to on. Instead, lucidity exists on a spectrum. Some dreamers notice only a faint suspicion that something is different. Others gain a clearer sense of perspective, recognizing that they are dreaming while still being carried along by the story. In rare moments, awareness becomes sharp enough to observe the dream without fully participating in it. What unites these experiences is not control, but reflection. The dreaming mind begins to look at itself. This is an unusual mental posture. In waking life, awareness and control often arrive together. When you notice something, you usually have the ability to respond deliberately. In lucid dreams, awareness can arise without that same degree of control. You may know you are dreaming and still feel unable to change the scene. Or you may choose to remain still, simply observing. This distinction matters. Lucid dreaming is often misunderstood as a form of fantasy where the dreamer becomes all-powerful. In reality, most lucid dreams are quiet, even fragile. Excitement can cause them to dissolve. Attempts to control too much can pull the dreamer back toward waking. Lucidity is less about mastery and more about balance. From a scientific perspective, lucid dreaming is fascinating because it reveals that the sleeping brain can support reflective awareness. The mind can hold two ideas at once. This is happening, and it is a dream. That ability is closely related to what philosophers call meta-awareness, the capacity to be aware of one's own mental state. In waking life, this capacity allows us to notice our thoughts and emotions rather than being completely swept up in them. In dreams, its appearance is rarer and more delicate, but no less meaningful. Neuroscientists have found that during lucid dreams, certain regions of the brain associated with self-reflection become slightly more active than in non-lucid dreaming. Not fully awake, not fully asleep, the brain occupies an in-between state. Awareness flickers back on, like a dim light in a darkened room. Yet even here, the dream does not lose its character. The imagery remains vivid. The emotions remain present. The body remains asleep. Lucidity does not replace the dream. It coexists with it. This coexistence challenges simple definitions of consciousness. We often imagine awareness as something that belongs either to waking or to sleep. Lucid dreaming suggests a more fluid picture. Awareness can rise and fall within sleep itself, without collapsing the dream state. For listeners before sleep, there is something deeply calming about this idea. It suggests that awareness is not something we must hold tightly. It can appear gently, without effort, and then fade again. Consciousness does not need to be forced. It can emerge naturally when conditions allow. Lucid dreams also reveal how flexible the sense of self can be. During these moments, you may recognize that the dream body is not your physical body. You may notice that your thoughts behave differently, yet the feeling of being someone, of existing somewhere, remains intact. The self persists, even as its usual anchors are loosened. This has led some researchers to view lucid dreaming as a kind of mirror held up to consciousness. It allows us to see which aspects of awareness are essential and which are products of waking habit. Control, logic, and memory may fade, but experience itself continues. Importantly, lucid dreaming does not require training or special techniques to be meaningful. Many people experience it spontaneously at least once in their lives, often during periods of transition or heightened reflection. These moments are not achievements, they are invitations. An invitation to notice how awareness behaves when it is freed from responsibility, when it does not need to plan, decide, or act, when it can simply observe. As you listen now, perhaps with your own thoughts becoming lighter, it may be comforting to know that awareness can exist in many forms. It does not always need to be sharp or directive. Sometimes it is enough for it to be present. Lucid dreaming reminds us that the boundary between waking and sleeping is not a wall but a gradient. Awareness does not disappear at night. It changes shape. And in those rare, quiet moments when it turns back on within the dream, it offers a glimpse of consciousness looking at itself gently, without urgency. Not to control the night, not to conquer the dream, but simply to know, for a moment, where it is. For a long time, dreams were thought to be sealed worlds. Once the sleeper crossed into them, there was no way back until morning. The dreaming mind could wander freely, but it could not be reached. From the outside, sleep looked like silence, and then, quietly, that assumption began to change. It started with a simple question. If someone becomes aware inside a dream, could they communicate that awareness to the waking world? Not by speaking, not by moving their body, but by using whatever channels remain open while the body sleeps. At first, this idea sounded improbable. Sleep had always been defined by disconnection. The muscles relax, the body grows still, the mind turns inward. But as researchers learned more about lucid dreaming, they noticed something intriguing. While most voluntary movement is suspended during dreaming, not everything is shut down completely. Certain small signals still pass through. The eyes, for example, remain mobile beneath closed lids. Breathing continues. Tiny changes in muscle tension can still occur. These signals are faint, but they are measurable. And in carefully designed studies, they became bridges. Lucid dreamers were asked to perform simple actions inside their dreams. When they realized they were dreaming, they would move their eyes in a specific pattern, such as left, right, left, right. These movements could be detected from the outside using gentle sensors placed near the eyes. For the first time, the dream announced itself. This was not a metaphor. It was a measurable signal sent from within the dream to the waking world. The sleeping mind, aware of its own state, reached out and tapped on the glass. What followed was even more remarkable. Researchers began asking simple questions while the dreamer slept. Nothing complicated. Basic arithmetic spoken aloud in a calm voice, yes or no questions. The dreamer, still asleep, still dreaming, responded using pre-agreed eye movements or breathing patterns. These responses were not guesses made after waking. They happened during the dream itself, time-stamped, recorded, verified. The sleeping mind was listening. This discovery reshaped how scientists thought about consciousness during sleep. Dreams were no longer private theatres cut off from the world. They were states in which awareness could persist, perceive external input, and respond meaningfully, all without waking the body. It is important to emphasize how gentle these interactions were. There was no interruption. No forcing of attention. The questions were whispered into the dream, not shouted. When the interaction worked, it worked because it aligned with the dreamer's awareness, not because it overpowered it. In some cases, dreamers later reported incorporating the questions into their dreams. A voice might appear asking a riddle. Numbers might float through the scene. The dream did not stop. It adapted. Breathing became another pathway. While speech is suppressed during sleep, the rhythm of breath remains under partial voluntary control. By taking a certain number of deeper breaths, dreamers could signal answers without waking. Even in sleep, the body retains subtle channels of expression. These findings reveal something quietly profound. Consciousness during sleep is not simply switched off, it is redistributed. Some doors close, but others remain ajar. The dreaming mind can hear, understand, and respond, as long as the interaction respects the state it is in. For listeners before sleep, there is something almost tender about this idea. The mind, even while dreaming, is not lost. It remains present, capable of awareness, capable of contact if approached softly enough. This challenges the way we usually think about communication. We often assume it requires full alertness, full control, full attention. Dream communication suggests otherwise. Meaning can pass through quieter channels. Awareness does not need to shout to be heard. These experiments also raise deeper questions. If the sleeping mind can answer questions, what does that say about the boundary between waking and dreaming consciousness? Is awareness something that simply disappears at night, or does it continue in altered form, waiting for the right conditions to express itself? The answers are still unfolding. What is clear is that consciousness is more flexible than once believed. It can bend without breaking. It can adapt to radically different conditions. At the same time, these discoveries invite caution. Communication with a sleeping mind works precisely because it is rare and delicate. Too much stimulation wakes the sleeper. Too much intrusion disrupts the dream. The success of these interactions depends on restraint. The sleeping mind does not want to be interrogated. It wants to be accompanied. As you listen now, perhaps with your own thoughts slowing, your breathing deepening, it may be comforting to know that awareness does not vanish when you sleep. It changes how it speaks. It listens more than it talks. It responds not with words, but with subtle signals. Dreaming is not a blackout. It is a dimly lit room where consciousness rearranges itself, and in that room, if approached gently, the mind can answer, not loudly, not dramatically, but enough to remind us that even in sleep we are still here, still aware, still listening. When people speak about creativity, they often imagine a moment of sudden brilliance, a flash of insight, a solution that appears fully formed, as if delivered from somewhere beyond conscious effort. What is less often discussed is how frequently these moments arrive after sleep, or emerge from dreams that seem, at first glance, unrelated to the problem at hand. This pattern is not accidental. Dreams create a unique environment for creative thought, one that is difficult to reproduce during waking life. In dreams, the mind is freed from many of the constraints that normally govern thinking. Logic loosens its grip. Familiar rules bend. Ideas that would never meet during the day are suddenly allowed to share the same space. This freedom turns the dreaming mind into a kind of sandbox. In a sandbox, there are no permanent structures. You can build, collapse, reshape, and rebuild without consequence. Nothing has to last. Nothing has to be correct. The value lies in exploration rather than completion. Dreams operate in much the same way. During waking hours, creativity often competes with efficiency. There is pressure to be useful, to make sense, to reach conclusions. The brain's internal editor is constantly evaluating ideas, discarding those that seem impractical or strange. This is helpful for decision-making, but it can stifle originality. At night, that editor relaxes. Ideas that would normally be dismissed are allowed to linger. Unlikely connections are explored without judgment. A memory from childhood can merge with a technical problem. An emotion can suggest a solution before logic has time to object. The dreaming mind does not ask whether something is reasonable. It asks whether it is interesting. This is why creative insights often feel surprising when they arrive. They were assembled in a mental environment where surprise was allowed. History offers many examples of this process, though the specific details are less important than the pattern itself. Scientists, artists, and inventors across cultures have described moments when solutions emerged after sleep, sometimes accompanied by vivid dreams, sometimes appearing suddenly upon waking. In these stories, The dream does not always present the answer directly. More often, it rearranges the problem, highlighting relationships that were invisible before. Dreams do not solve problems step by step. They change how problems are seen. One reason for this is the way dreams handle association. During waking thought, associations tend to follow familiar paths. Ideas connect to related ideas, forming predictable chains. In dreams, associations are looser. The mind is more willing to jump between distant concepts, creating links that feel odd but revealing. This associative freedom is a powerful engine for creativity. It allows the brain to explore a wider solution space, testing combinations that would be rejected during the day. Most of these combinations go nowhere. They dissolve by morning, but occasionally one of them holds. Another important feature of the dreaming sandbox is emotional safety. In dreams, failure carries no real-world cost. You can try an idea and abandon it instantly. You can explore a direction that feels risky or absurd. This lack of consequence encourages experimentation. Even nightmares, unpleasant as they can be, reflect this exploratory function. The mind pushes emotional boundaries, testing responses, stretching tolerance. Creativity does not always feel comfortable. Sometimes it emerges from tension rather than ease. There is also something important about the pace of dreaming. Dreams unfold slowly without deadlines. They are not interrupted by notifications or obligations. This uninterrupted time allows ideas to develop organically, without being forced into immediate usefulness. As you listen now, perhaps noticing your own thoughts drifting more freely, you may recognize this state. When the pressure to produce an answer fades, the mind begins to wander. Creativity thrives in that wandering. Dreams amplify this effect by removing even more constraints. The body is still. The outside world is muted. Attention turned inward. In this environment, the mind can explore possibilities with remarkable depth. Importantly, creative dreams do not require effort or intention. You do not need to ask for them. They arise naturally when the brain is given space to roam. Attempts to force creativity during dreams often backfire, waking the mind's editor too early. This is why many creative breakthroughs feel unearned. They arrive without struggle, as if the mind did the work elsewhere and simply delivered the result when asked. Dreams also help creativity by loosening attachment to existing solutions. During waking life, it is easy to become fixated on a particular approach. The mind circles the same ideas repeatedly. Sleep interrupts this loop. By breaking the continuity of thought, dreams allow new perspectives to emerge. Sometimes the most creative act is letting go. When you wake from a dream with a new idea, it may not feel complete. It may be vague or difficult to articulate. That is because it was not designed to be finished. Dreams provide raw material, not polished results. The waking mind must still shape and test what the dream offers, but without the dream's contribution, that material might never appear. As the night continues, and as your own mind prepares to enter its quieter modes, the same creative sandbox waits. It does not promise brilliance. It does not guarantee insight, but it offers freedom. Freedom from judgment, freedom from efficiency, freedom to explore. And in that freedom, creativity often finds its way, quietly assembling new possibilities while the world sleeps. Not every dream will inspire. Most will fade unnoticed. But night after night, the dreaming mind keeps the sandbox open, ready for ideas to play, to combine, and occasionally to surprise. And when morning comes, those surprises may be waiting gently for you to notice them. There is a moment that exists at the edge of sleep, a quiet threshold where the mind has not fully let go of the day, yet no longer holds it tightly. Thoughts drift. Images appear and fade. Sounds seem distant, as if coming from another room. Time feels softer here, less demanding. This is the space between sleep and wakefulness, and it has a character all its own. In this in-between state, the mind behaves differently. Logic loosens, but awareness has not disappeared. You might hear your name called when no one is there, or see a brief image flash behind your closed eyes. Ideas may surface suddenly, fully formed, then vanish just as quickly. It can feel like standing in fog, where shapes emerge only long enough to be recognized. Scientists often refer to this boundary state as hypnagogia, but the name matters far less than the experience itself. It is a state many people know intimately, even if they have never named it. It appears just before sleep and sometimes just after waking, when the mind is drifting rather than directing. What makes this state so interesting is how fertile it can be for insight. During waking life, attention is focused outward. The mind must respond to tasks, conversations, and expectations. In deep sleep, attention turns inward, but awareness becomes diffuse. Hypnagogia sits between these two modes. The mind is relaxed, but still present. This combination allows ideas to appear without being immediately judged or dismissed. Many artists, thinkers, and problem solvers have noticed the value of this state, often by accident. A solution appears while drifting off. A melody arrives just as consciousness fades. An image suggests a new direction for a piece of work. These moments feel fragile. If attention sharpens too much, they disappear. If sleep deepens, they dissolve. The challenge of hypnagogia is that it cannot be held onto forcefully. Trying to capture it often pushes the mind back into full wakefulness. Letting go completely carries you into sleep. The state exists only while balance is maintained. A helpful image is that of skimming a stone across water. Too much force, and it sinks. Too little, and it never leaves your hand. Hypnagogic insight arrives when the touch is just right. This delicacy is part of its power. Because the mind is not trying to solve anything, it is free to notice connections that would otherwise be overlooked. Thoughts are less linear. Associations form quickly, without needing to justify themselves. Emotion and imagery guide the process rather than logic. This does not mean that hypnagogia is chaotic. There is a structure to it, even if it feels loose. The mind draws from recent experiences, unresolved questions, and long-held memories, weaving them together briefly before moving on. These fleeting constructions are often more suggestive than complete, offering hints rather than answers. For some, this state is accompanied by gentle physical sensations, a feeling of falling, a sense of movement, a sudden muscle twitch. These sensations are signs that the body is preparing for sleep while the mind still lingers at the surface. It is worth noting that hypnagogia is not a dream, nor is it fully waking thought. It does not have the immersive quality of dreams where the mind constructs entire worlds. Instead, it offers glimpses, snapshots, fragments that feel meaningful without being fully explained. These fragments can be deeply creative precisely because they are incomplete. They invite continuation. The waking mind, upon returning, may pick up one of these threads and begin to develop it consciously. In this way, hypnagogia acts as a bridge between the creative freedom of dreaming and the practical reasoning of waking life. It allows ideas to cross from one mode to the other. As you listen now, perhaps noticing your own thoughts slowing, you may find moments when images or ideas drift in unexpectedly. You may hear a phrase echo or see a colour linger in the mind's eye. There is no need to hold on to these impressions. Their value lies in their appearance, not in their capture. This state is also deeply calming. Because the mind is not actively directing itself, tension eases. The effort of thinking gives way to a more receptive mode. Awareness becomes gentle, curious rather than demanding. For those listening before sleep, this gentleness is part of the invitation. You do not need to aim for insight. You do not need to produce anything. Simply allowing the mind to hover in this space can be enough. Hypnagogia reminds us that creativity does not always require effort. Sometimes it emerges when effort is released, when attention softens, when the need to control fades. In modern life, where alertness is prized and rest is often interrupted, these in-between states are easy to miss, yet they return naturally each night, waiting patiently at the edge of sleep. As the night deepens, this space will eventually give way to dreaming. Awareness will recede, images will grow more immersive, but for a brief moment the mind has the opportunity to rest in this gentle balance, neither fully awake nor fully asleep. And in that balance, something quietly remarkable can happen. The mind listens without searching. It notices without effort. It allows ideas to surface and pass on their own terms. So if tonight, as you drift towards sleep, a thought appears and then fades, let it go. If an image flashes and disappears, allow it to dissolve. This is not loss. It is the natural rhythm of the mind finding its way into rest. The space between sleep and wakefulness does not ask to be understood. It asks only to be experienced, and as you move through it gently, you are already doing exactly what the mind needs in order to rest, to imagine, and to begin dreaming. When you dream, you're rarely alone. Other figures appear, speak, argue, comfort, or confront you. Some are familiar, some are strangers. Some feel deeply important, even if you've never seen their faces before. And when you wake, a quiet question sometimes lingers. Who were they? It is tempting to answer quickly. They were just dreams, just imagination. But that answer misses something subtle. These figures did not arrive from nowhere. They emerged from the same mind that experiences them. In dreams, the mind becomes both the stage and the cast. Unlike waking life, where the sense of self feels singular and continuous, dreaming allows identity to fragment gently. Different perspectives appear as separate characters. Emotions take shape as people. Conflicting thoughts speak with different voices. The dream does not announce this division, it simply presents it as reality. From a psychological perspective, this is not as strange as it sounds. Even during the day, the mind is not a single voice. You may feel torn between caution and curiosity, responsibility and desire, comfort and change. These tensions usually play out quietly beneath awareness. In dreams, they step forward and take form. A dream character who criticizes you may represent an internal voice you rarely listen to while awake. A protective figure may embody a sense of safety you're learning to trust. A threatening presence may express fear that has not yet found words. These figures are not symbols to be decoded rigidly. They are expressions shaped by emotion rather than logic. This is why dream characters often feel so real. They are not inventions in the usual sense. They are parts of you, speaking in the only language dreams use, the language of experience. Importantly, this does not mean the self is broken or divided in a harmful way. It means the self is layered, complex, capable of holding multiple perspectives at once. Dreaming simply removes the need to compress those perspectives into a single narrative voice. In waking life, identity is maintained through consistency. You remember who you are. You follow certain patterns. You behave in ways that align with your role in the world. During dreaming, many of these anchors loosen. Memory becomes fluid. Roles shift easily. This allows different aspects of the self to emerge without needing to agree. Some researchers describe this as a form of internal dialogue. Not dialogue in the sense of spoken words, but in the sense of interaction. Parts of the mind encounter one another as if they were separate beings. They negotiate, conflict, cooperate, or simply coexist. Dreams provide a safe space for this interaction. There are no lasting consequences, no reputations to protect, no explanations required. A part of the self can express anger without damaging a relationship. Another can explore vulnerability without fear of judgment. This freedom is one reason dreams can feel emotionally intense. Feelings that are carefully regulated during the day are allowed to speak openly at night. The dream does not demand resolution. It allows expression. For listeners before sleep, this perspective can be quietly reassuring. It suggests that inner conflict is not a flaw to be eliminated. It is a sign of complexity. The mind contains many voices because it must respond to many situations. Dreams give those voices a place to be heard. This idea also challenges the notion of a single, fixed self. If identity can shift so easily during dreams, perhaps it is more flexible than we usually assume. The self may be less like a solo performer and more like a small ensemble, each voice stepping forward when needed. This does not diminish individuality, it deepens it. During waking life, coherence matters. Decisions must be made, actions must be taken. A unified sense of self is practical and necessary. At night, that pressure eases. The mind can afford to explore its own diversity. Dream characters, then, are not intruders. They are participants. They represent ways of being that exist within you, whether or not they are expressed during the day. Some dreams make this explicit. You may encounter a character who claims to be you, or who acts in ways you recognize but rarely allow yourself. Other dreams are more subtle. The connection is felt rather than stated. Either way, the experience can leave a residue. You may wake with a new understanding of a feeling without knowing exactly how it formed. You may sense a shift in attitude, a softening or a strengthening, without remembering the conversation that produced it. This again reminds us that dreams do not need to be remembered to matter. Their influence often works beneath awareness, adjusting emotional balances, easing tensions, or highlighting neglected perspectives. As you listen now, perhaps noticing your own inner voices quieting, you may recognize that even in stillness, the mind is not singular. Thoughts rise and fall, feelings pass through, attention shifts gently. Dreaming is simply this process, amplified and externalized. By allowing the self to appear as many, dreams teach us something important about consciousness. Identity is not a rigid structure, it is a living process. One that adapts, experiments, and reconfigures itself continually. And each night, as the world fades and the inner stage lights come up, those many voices gather again. Not to argue, not to compete, but to exist together, briefly, in the shared space of a dream. Listening to them is not required, but knowing they are there can make the mind feel a little more whole. For most of human history, sleep was one of the few places beyond reach. When the body rested and the eyes closed, the mind entered a private world. Dreams came and went without witnesses. Whatever happened there belonged only to the dreamer. Even the dreamer might not remember it by morning. In recent years, that quiet privacy has begun to change, slowly and almost imperceptibly. As science learns more about the sleeping brain, new possibilities emerge. Wearable devices can track sleep stages. Soft sounds can be timed to certain moments of the night. Gentle cues can influence memory and emotion without waking the sleeper. None of this feels invasive on its own. Each advance arrives wrapped in convenience and care. And yet, taken together, these developments invite a deeper question. What does it mean to interact with a mind that cannot fully consent in the moment? This is not a question of fear, but of responsibility. The techniques discussed earlier, such as targeted memory reactivation or communication with lucid dreamers, work precisely because they are subtle. They respect the brain's rhythms, they do not force attention, they succeed by cooperating with the sleeping mind rather than overpowering it. But cooperation depends on intention. When a person chooses to use such techniques for learning, therapy, or self-exploration, the ethical landscape is relatively clear. Consent is given while awake. The sleeper knows what may happen and why. The mind participates willingly, even if it does not remain fully aware during the process. The questions become more complex when technology acts on the sleeping mind without that clear agreement. Consider how easily sound can shape dreams. A distant melody may become part of a dream's background. A spoken word may appear as a voice in the scene. Smells can influence emotional tone without ever being noticed consciously. These effects are gentle, but they are real. If dreams help shape memory, emotion, and identity, then influencing dreams is not trivial. It is a form of mental contact. This does not mean such contact is inherently wrong. Dreams have always been influenced by the environment. Temperature, noise, light, and daily experience all leave their mark. What changes with modern technology is precision. The ability to time, target, and repeat influence deliberately. Precision brings power, and power invites reflection. One concern raised by ethicists is the idea of consent during vulnerability. Sleep is a state in which critical thinking and self-monitoring are reduced. The mind is open, imaginative, and less guarded. Influencing someone during that state, even gently, carries a different weight than doing so while they are awake. Another concern involves ownership. Dreams feel deeply personal. They are tied to emotion, memory, and identity. If external systems can shape them, even subtly, where does the boundary lie between self and environment? These questions are not meant to alarm, they are meant to slow us down. The history of science offers many examples where capability advanced faster than reflection. In those cases, ethical frameworks often arrived late, after harm had already occurred. With sleep and dreaming, there is an opportunity to think ahead. Many researchers advocate for a simple guiding principle. The sleeping mind should be treated with the same respect as the waking one. Influence should be transparent, consensual, and reversible. The goal should be support, not manipulation. This principle aligns with what the science itself reveals. The sleeping brain responds best to gentleness. When pushed too hard, it wakes. When overwhelmed, it resists. Respect is not just ethical, it is practical. There is also a broader cultural question at play. In a world that values productivity and optimization, sleep can become another resource to be exploited. Learn faster while you sleep, improve performance overnight, refine habits without effort. These promises sound appealing, but they risk reducing rest to a tool rather than honoring it as a fundamental human need. Sleep is not empty time to be filled. It is an active, restorative state that supports mental health, emotional balance, and creativity. Dreams in particular occupy a delicate place. They are one of the few spaces where the mind is free from external demands. Even if they are strange or uncomfortable, they belong to the dreamer alone. Protecting that space does not require rejecting scientific progress. It requires guiding it thoughtfully. As you listen now, perhaps already drifting towards sleep, it may be comforting to remember that your dreams are still yours. The science of sleep does not diminish their mystery. If anything, it deepens it by revealing how much care is required to approach the sleeping mind without disturbing it. Ethics at the edge of sleep is not about drawing rigid lines. It is about cultivating awareness. about remembering that behind every dataset, every signal, every wearable graph, there is a person resting. And in that rest there is trust. Trust that the night will be allowed to do its quiet work. Trust that the mind can wander freely without being steered or shaped without permission. As science continues to learn how to listen to the sleeping brain, it must also learn when to remain silent. Sometimes, the most respectful interaction with the dreaming mind is simply to let it dream. As night deepens and the world grows quiet, something remarkable happens again and again so reliably that we rarely stop to consider it. The body lies still. Awareness loosens its grip on the surroundings, and yet, experience does not disappear. It transforms. Dreaming invites us to reconsider what consciousness really is. We often think of consciousness as something that requires control, clarity, and memory. To be conscious, we assume, is to know where you are, to remember who you are, and to act deliberately in the world. Dreams gently challenge each of these assumptions. In dreams, control is reduced or absent. Logic drifts, memory becomes fluid, and yet, experience continues vividly. You see, you feel, you respond. The dream unfolds as a lived reality, even when it defies every rule of waking life. This tells us something important. Consciousness does not depend entirely on control. It also does not depend on memory. As we've seen, most dreams are forgotten. Entire worlds are experienced and then allowed to vanish without a trace. And yet, during those moments, awareness was real. Emotion was real. Experience was real. Dreaming suggests that consciousness can exist without leaving evidence behind. This idea can feel unsettling at first. We're used to defining experience by what we can recall. If something cannot be remembered, we tend to treat it as if it never happened. Dreams invite a softer perspective. They show us that experience can be meaningful even if it is temporary. In this way, dreams resemble other fleeting moments of awareness. A passing feeling, a thought that arises and fades, a sensation noticed briefly and then forgotten. Consciousness may be less like a record keeper and more like a flowing process. Dreams also reveal that consciousness does not require a stable sense of self. In dreams, identity shifts easily. You may inhabit different roles. You may observe yourself from the outside. You may forget your waking life entirely. And still, there is a sense of being someone somewhere. This suggests that the self is not the foundation of consciousness, but one of its expressions. Rather than a single point, consciousness may be a field, capable of generating many perspectives depending on context. Waking life emphasizes consistency and continuity. Dreaming allows flexibility and variation. Both arise from the same underlying capacity to experience. From this perspective, dreaming becomes more than a nightly curiosity. It becomes a window into how awareness behaves when freed from its usual constraints. It shows us what remains when goals, responsibilities, and social roles fall away. What remains is experience itself. There is also something deeply human in the rhythm of dreaming. Every night, without effort, the mind enters a state where imagination, emotion, and memory intermingle. This happens across cultures, across histories, across individual differences. Dreams remind us of a shared inner life that exists beneath surface variation. They also remind us of humility. For all our advances in science and technology, consciousness remains partly mysterious. We can measure brain activity. We can map networks. We can interact gently with the sleeping mind. But the subjective quality of experience, what it feels like to dream, to be aware in a world made entirely of the mind, resists complete explanation. And perhaps that resistance is not a problem to be solved, but a feature to be respected. As you listen now, maybe already drifting closer to sleep, you are approaching that same threshold. The waking mind begins to soften. Attention turns inward. Soon, the structures that define daytime awareness will loosen, and another form of consciousness will take their place. This transition does not mean you disappear. It means you change how you are present. Dreaming teaches us that consciousness is not a single state, but a family of states. Some are sharp and focused, others are diffuse and imaginative. Some are remembered, others pass without leaving a mark. All are part of the same unfolding process. In the quiet of the night, this process continues without supervision. You do not need to guide it. You do not need to understand it fully. It has been happening long before you were aware of it, and it will continue long after you fall asleep. And so, as this journey through the dreaming mind comes to a close, it may be enough simply to appreciate what each night offers: a chance to rest, a chance to imagine, a chance to experience consciousness in one of its most ancient and gentle forms. Dreams do not ask to be analysed. They do not demand interpretation. They invite participation, and then they let go. Every night, a quiet inner universe awakens. It lives briefly. It fades. And in doing so, it reminds us that being conscious is not about holding on. It is about being present, even if only for a moment. And as you drift now toward whatever dreams may come, that presence is already beginning to change shape, carrying you gently into the night,